David Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Compassion and robustness go hand in hand when it comes to the way in which we manage our borders. And our common humanity requires that we update our approach as the challenges that we face in the world develop. Every government in every era, every generation has been looking for a system that is more efficient, that is safer for those seeking refuge, that is cheaper for taxpayers in the United Kingdom and the communities that are taking refugees in, and that is more humane in the way that it supports people who faced some of the most terrible circumstances. And the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, when we look at the information on their website, we see that this, although in our debate it is very much about what is happening in the European neighbourhood, is an issue that is challenging governments and countries and populations across the whole of the world. In Westminster, it is an issue that Parliament has wrestled with since immigration by the post-war Labour government in response to the retreat from empire. And most of us as constituency MPs will know that our constituents have a very wide range of views on the issue. On the doorsteps, campaigning in elections, we will all have heard a good deal of concern from constituents, from voters, about the impact of migration on the UK. As a constituency member of Parliament, I've had umpteen contacts from constituents asking me to intervene to prevent the deportation from the UK of someone who's been found to be an illegal immigrant in my constituency, who they know, who their friends know, who lives in the neighbourhood. I've yet to have a single contact letting me know about an illegal immigrant that someone wants to see removed. So there is a conundrum in this debate, which is that our voters, our constituents, are in general very concerned to see that our borders are effectively managed, but tend to have a very positive view of those migrants, those refugees that they know in their community and in their neighbourhood. Perhaps that reflects the fact that the UK is not a particularly popular destination for asylum in Europe. The UNHCR figures again indicate that in terms of refugees, Germany has around 10 times as many as we do in the UK. And the UK is a middling destination in terms of our European neighbourhood for asylum seekers. But the UK is particularly active in resettlement. And that is something which this House and the government should rightly be proud of, in creating safe legal routes for people who we've identified displaced because of war and conflict, who can be resettled in the UK. So for me, it is an essential principle that we build on the success of things like the Syrian Vulnerable Peoples Relocation Scheme, that cut out the people smugglers from the system and enabled communities the length and breadth of the United Kingdom to welcome refugees without any of the challenges that we've faced with some other parts of the asylum system. We also know that of those who arrive by any route outside of resettlement, around 3/4 are granted asylum under UK law, which shows that most do have a well-founded claim, however they arrive into our country. So we clearly need to tackle the major problems that are inherent in the routes by which people arrive. The smuggling of people to our country and to the rest of Europe is helping to fund terrorist organisations in parts of the world who are making money out of the deaths, the misery of many, many thousands of vulnerable people. There are criminals closer to home, and we've seen some particularly hideous cases in the United Kingdom where large numbers of refugees have died in the hands of those criminals because of the way in which they are being smuggled into our country. I personally saw on a visit to the Jungle refugee camp in Calais, smugglers driving around, offering what is essentially a rate sheet. If you can pay this many euros, you're allowed to break into a lorry. If you can pay significantly more, we will smuggle you into the UK in a British plated car with a British driver. It is an absolutely evil trade, and we have no idea how many people have lost their lives in the waters of the English Channel trying to get to refuge in our country. So we must tackle that. And it is clearly critical that we have a really effective programme of safe and legal routes. And those safe and legal routes need to work in both directions. This is not just about people who may be fleeing persecution who need to come to the UK. We do need, post-Brexit and the loss of the Dublin arrangements, to have routes in place with other third-party safe countries. And it is critical, in my view, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we get a clear assurance from government that we will have that in place in order to make a real success of the proposed arrangements. But fundamentally, we need to ensure that we retain public goodwill and confidence. We need to consider the way in which this operates in the UK. Asylum seekers were first treated separately from the wider benefits system under the Labour government of Tony Blair in the early 2000s. Dispersal was created under Andy Burnham, then the Immigration Minister, now the Mayor of Greater Manchester, in 2005. And there are lessons from that system that we need to be wary of trying to do it on the cheap. Unaccompanied children, dispersal, all demonstrate that engaging communities is difficult when we do it on the cheap, whereas the Syrian resettlement scheme, which was costly, also garnered a huge amount of public goodwill and was much more effective in securing public confidence because it was demonstrated in advance that people had a well-founded claim to be in the United Kingdom. And it is not a matter of law, but this House will need to be vigilant to ensure that the system is resourced so that the ambitions that are set out can be achieved. Turning to the question of how we achieve that, the plumbing, the wiring of the system clearly needs to work right. The concept of effective advocacy and advice for refugees at the point of entry to enable them to lodge a really effective claim is critical. We need to make sure that the way we work at the border enables us to understand the circumstances of the asylum seeker as fully as possible. And we will need to recognise that if we are to have a two-tier system that treats people differently according to their means of transit to the UK, that in some parts of the world it may, for example, have been necessary to pay a people smuggler to get out of immediate danger and then to make the rest of the journey by another route. And I need to consider how our courts will carry forward decisions on that process. But there have been a number of steps in a positive direction. The recent announcement about working visas for those seeking asylum is. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this House needs to balance the views and the needs of all parts of our country. When it comes to migration, that means the businesses in my constituency crying out for new workers to enable them to make the most of opportunities, with those communities already under pressure for housing need and social challenges for whom new arrivals may be seen as an unacceptable burden. If we go local, we engage communities, we recognise complexity, then we have a chance of making this much more effective.